block is comprised of 4 corner units, and each of those units is comprised of 2 squares and 1 rectangle. And then the rest of the block is simply 4 rectangles of your lighter fabric and 1 darker fabric square. To make one block, I've started out with 2 width of fabric strips cut 2.5 inches wide. From the darker fabric, cut 5 2.5-inch squares and 4 2.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles. From the lighter colored fabric, cut 4 2.5-inch squares and 4 2.5 by 4.5-inch rectangles. I'll begin by making these corner units, and you can see there's your rectangle and the 2 squares. So first I'll join 4 of my dark squares with 4 of my light squares, and it's as simple as right sides together and then 1/4 inch seam allowance right down one side. I have my leader fabric, I have my 1/4 inch presser foot, and I have my light and dark squares lined up, and I'm not using a pin because these are pretty small, but if you're more comfortable using a pin, go ahead and use them. And just feed it through. And then after I get this one sewn, I'll just chain piece these. That just means not stopping sewing, just keep right on going. And I'll just snip these apart. And then I will press toward my dark fabric, so I just have my darker fabric on top. Set the seam. Give it a little finger press and press. And I'll repeat that on these 3 other patches. To complete these corner units, I'll attach my 4.5-inch strips, and I'll need 2 units with the lighter colored square on the left and 2 with the lighter colored square on the right. So I've oriented my units in that fashion with 2 on the left, 2 on the right, and it's right sides together. And now I will pin, so I'll be sure to sew the right side together. So this just indicates to me I want to start sewing here and sew in this direction. And this is just a rough pin. I'll take them to the sewing machine, make sure they're nicely lined up, and sew 1/4 inch seam allowance right down each of these sides. I'll press toward my rectangles, so I'll have those right on top. Set the seam. Give it a finger press and press. And you can see now with my rectangles sewn on the top, I have 2 patches with the dark on the left and 2 patches with the light fabric on the left. Now I have it all laid out, and you can see with my corner patches I've made sure that my rectangles are all in the same position. So on the bottom, they're on the top, and on the top, they're on the bottom, like so. And I did want to show you, you can take this corner here and flip it around, okay, and create that corner, okay? So it's almost exactly the same. The only difference is your rectangle is now on the side instead of the bottom. And I like to keep them consistent, having my rectangles in the same spots for later when I'm quilting. Say I wanted to quilt Stitch in the Ditch, for example. Then I would be able to do it exactly the same here and here. And if I used this configuration, there would be no ditch to stitch in here. So that's why I'm sewed them together like I did. And to join them, right sides together, pin indicating the direction that I want to sew. And if I were doing this not on camera, I would do this right next to my sewing machine. Again, a 1/4 inch seam allowance right along here. Now that these are sewn together, I'll add these sides to here. And you'll notice I haven't pressed just yet. I'll wait until I finish sewing these sides on. Again, right sides together. I'll take it to the machine and off camera, I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance right along here. Now before I join these 3 rows, I will press, and I'll press this row and this row in the same direction and this row in the opposite direction, and that'll just make it really helpful for my seams to match up pretty easily. And I'll press that with the iron off camera. Now I'll attach my top row to my center, right sides together, and I'll carefully match up my seams. And because they're pressed in opposite directions, you can see this one and this one's going this way. Pin, and this one. I'll take it to the machine, a 1/4 inch seam allowance right along here. And check your work to see how you matched up, and they look really nice. Now that these are sewn together, I'll attach my final 3rd row in the same exact way. I'll match up my seams and pin. And then off camera, I'll take it to the machine and I'll sew, again, same thing, 1/4 inch seam right along here. Now that all 3 rows are sewn together, I'll give it a final press. I'll set those seams. And I like to finger press because it helps to not get these seams twisted. And this side. And the block should measure 10.5 inches square, and these 2 sides are lined up exactly at 10.5 inches, and I have a teeny bit of extra right here that I'll go ahead and trim off. And I've made sure that it's very even along my seam lines. And now it's 10.5 inches square. Here's a table topper I made using 4 of the blocks. I used a little different fabric, a yellow and a blue print. All I did was join them together, the 4 blocks, added a border, did some simple stippling, added the backing with the matching fabric, and you have a simple but cute table topper.